I'm with Bradley Michael from Seagrass Boutique Hospitality Group. Welcome, Bradley.
Thank you.
So what I might do, I want to talk about the food journey because it's quite interesting, your background. Can you tell us where your passion for food first developed? What was the spark that set your career off to where we've ended now? But we'll cover the bit later, but I want to know the beginning now.
It's strange. It started in the army. I was a PTR parabat, and then they put me in the army with a top German chef at the time, and I was there for 3 weeks, and he taught me how to serve 100, 200, 1,000 people at one time, and why he cooked the way he cooked, and the passion he put into making scrambled eggs, why the potatoes had to be done a certain way, where the other chefs weren't doing what he was doing. And we were in the army and it was mass production, but he took care in everything he did. And and I asked him, I said, why are you doing this when you're cooking 5 boxes of eggs or 2,000 eggs and 25 bags of potatoes? He says, I love the view, the look on the soldiers' faces when they eat the food. When I cook it, they know that I'm there, and it gives me fun, it gives me joy. And then when I started serving the boys and you start seeing them eating the food that him and I were cooking, you saw them wanting to eat more. You saw them wanting to come back. And he said, you see, and that for some reason gave me a urge to serve people and make them happy.
I always say an army marches on its stomach, no truer word spoken.
Yeah.
So where did you take it from there? So basically you were a trainer in that, so like a military trainer in the army, and then you noticed this sort of passion for food and this serving, and where did you take it? What was your next step?
So you see, we had to go to the army. It was compulsory in South Africa. So you only had 2 years, and then after that you could do what you wanted. And I decided after working in the kitchen for 3 weeks, food was where I wanted to be. My family had a furniture factory, and when I came out of the army, the furniture factory had closed. So the food was the next move for me, and I wanted to learn about food. So I went into franchising. So you understand the routines, the disciplines, where you buy, how you buy, the consistency of buying. And I took a small franchise, a burger franchise, and I started enjoying it, and it started doing well. Then I got bought out. Then I went into a hospital canteen, which was very, very challenging. But the type of people you meet, coming in sad, happy, births, deaths, and serving them with meals that they wanted at the time. And then sold that, and then decided I wanted to, because South Africa was a very meat-orientated country, very sports-orientated, very meat-orientated. So I bought a very old, it's a steakhouse that was very well known for doing ribs, steaks and burgers. Started in 1963. They were closing, so I took over one of their stores. I bought the brand called Black Steer, and I started working it from the kitchen all the way through. Spent about 5 years in the kitchen cooking, and then decided one day to franchise that brand. And in 3 years, I had 156 stores.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about South African cuisine, because it's a mosaic of quite a few influences. So what's your take on South African sort of cuisine?
South African cuisine is balanced between Cape Town, which is a mixed. When I say Cape Town, there's population in Cape Town that have been influenced by the Indians. There's an Afrikaans, very, very Afrikaans, which is farming in South Africa at the time. Most of the Afrikaners were farmers. All had land, all were farming cattle and greenery. So there's spices, there's chilies, there's curries, there's meat, a lot of chicken, deep fried and grilled, KFC is one of their biggest outlets in South Africa and Africa.
So a chef in South Africa has to understand balance because we're bringing different elements together. And
Most definitely.
yeah, and I was just saying earlier on that I can see essences of that in your current brand in Australia, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But it's a beautiful spice element to it with nice counterpoints to it, and it's interesting, and it stimulates the palate, which is great.
Well, that's good.
Okay, so basically you got successful in South Africa, started up your business there. Can you tell us about the next phase on firstly how you thought about coming to Australia, and then about how you transitioned from South Africa to Australia, because that would be quite a challenge in itself. So
It was a big challenge. Well, after I grew the franchise restaurant group, I got offered to list the company in Johannesburg, which was a big offer. We were still small, but the offer was so good that I took it, and it took my business to another level. On the stock exchange, dealing with shareholders, having a board, was a big move for me from a cook into running a franchise operation, then listing the company. And when we did that, I was given the rights to Planet Hollywood for South Africa. And at the time, Planet Hollywood was up there. All the movie stars were flying all over the world. It was a big thing at the time for the South African market. Mandela had just come out of jail. He was appointed the Prime Minister. And he wanted to meet all the movie stars. And it was a big move for us to bring it in. We brought it into Cape Town. And it took the shares from $2 to $9, the announcement. So it was a big one. And then Planet Hollywood got bombed. Someone put a bomb in the restaurant, and big disaster. And 3 people died, and it wasn't good at the time. And I decided, I don't want to carry on in South Africa. Yeah. That was my turning point for me. So I decided to sell out of the listed company, have a look around the world. I went to London, I went to LA, and then I came here. And what intrigued me about Australia, it was, at the time, 21 years ago, steak wasn't in vogue at the time. There was maybe 2-3 steakhouses, Lone Star, Outback, Ribs and Rumps, and maybe Hurricanes at the time. Or they were just opening. And I decided, no, I'm going to do steak. It's very similar to South Africa. The weather's the same, very similar. They play the same sports. And in Australia, they love meat. Yeah. So I thought, if we do it and we do it right, and we tick all the boxes, we should have a chance to grow in Australia. It's a safer place for me to bring my kids. I've got 3 daughters and my wife. And they were young, 10, 7, and 5 at the time. So I thought I'd bring them and we'd settle here. And for the first 7 years, it was a heavy battle for me. Because I never had the connections in the bank. I couldn't raise money in Australia. I never knew suppliers. David Beekwood was a gentleman of note from Beek & Johnson. He helped me source the right meat when I first opened. And I found a site in Darling Harbour just after the Olympics. And we opened our first meat mine in Sydney.
Out of curiosity, when you arrived just around about, what year was it, 2000?
Beginning of 2002.
2002.
January, yeah.
What did you make of Australian cuisine when you first came out? From being from South Africa, and you'd obviously eaten well around the world. What was your initial perception of Australian cuisine?
Yeah, look, Sydney, Melbourne more than Sydney, was the place to eat. Sydney wasn't at the time, but you had your chefs like Neil Perry and your Matt Morans that were up there, that you couldn't enter their market. And you had to I had to play in a different field to them. But traveling to Melbourne and tasting the flavors and what the chefs were doing at the time, they were cutting edge. South Africa was way behind in flavors, cuisine at the time. We were just starting to come into our own. And it was more about a casual, consistent dining experience than a chef experience. So it was a little bit frightening for me coming into a new country, but it took me 7 years to settle.
Yeah. You came at the right time too, because it was interesting, because modern Australian, through people like Neil Perry, and that was just emerging when you came. But your thoughts on Australian produce? So, what were your first initial thoughts when you looked around and you thought, okay, well, what beef? What's the quality of the beef and other elements? What did you think of
That
it?
was amazing, absolutely amazing. It was the best that I've worked with or seen around the world, and I just didn't know why. London wasn't close, LA was nowhere near where we were, and meeting up with a top meat supplier like David, he educated me, took me to farms, took me to sheep farms, because he knew the South African market and he knew how they grew and how they fed beef in South Africa, and he knew how far apart my knowledge was from a South African cattle farm to an Australian cattle farm. And he worked with me over a 2-year period to educate me to understand the quality of meat and how they grade them, how they feed them, what they feed them, how long they feed them for. And once you start understanding that mentality of farming, and you start getting into it and you buy into it, it's a little bit more expensive, but the product is superb.
What were the points of difference you identified in Australian beef compared to, say, the beef you could access in South Africa?
The beef in Australia was older, had better flavour. South Africans were killing their cattle at a very young age, maybe 80 days fed on grain, and they were sending them to the abattoirs. Yeah, the guys had different programs. So you could have a yearling up to 100 days. You can even go to 300 days if you wanted to pay the price. But when you're starting out in a restaurant, I did a survey, very interesting, on what the Australian market wants and what the South African market wanted. The South African market wanted flavour in their meat, so they put a basting over everything, because there was no flavour in 80-day grain fed. Australia, they wanted tenderness. Weren't concerned about the flavour of the meat, because there was always flavour in the beef anyway. So I was very hesitant to play with the basting process on such good meat. So we pulled that process all the way back. We watered down the basting process in Australia, and we tested the market. You could have it with or without basting. And once they came in for the first time and tasted the basting and then didn't have basting, we built a clientele around a basted steak. And that's where we had the niche in the marketplace. But all our high quality beef, we don't baste.
When you came to Australia, what was your idea when you came out as far as your business concept? Was it to transition the brand from South Africa, or did that change a little bit once you got here, the concept of it?
Well, the model that I had in South Africa, I thought I could bring here, but it didn't fit. The South African plug that I thought I could plug into the socket in Australia didn't work. I had a very good young Australian restaurant manager at the time, who was born in Sydney, who actually schooled me in the Australian thinking. He worked for me, but he taught me a lot about how the Australian palate worked, how the mentality of designing and putting a menu together worked, because it was different. People read the menu differently in South Africa to Australia. So that was a big learning curve. But Australians are very loyal. If you give them good quality consistently at a good price, and they get it all the time, they come back.
Yeah.
And that's what I found. Moving into Darling Harbour was a shock, because Darling Harbour at the time was, after the Olympics, wasn't what Darling Harbour was. And I relied a lot on travellers, tourists, and a lot of people coming from the west to Darling Harbour. So I was targeting people from the east, and I wasn't getting them. But I've learned.
It's very interesting, because we're at Meat and Wine Co in Barangaroo today, and I was saying to someone earlier today, I think Barangaroo is what we originally wanted for Darling Harbour, but didn't quite work, and now Barangaroo is quite a sophisticated, cosmopolitan, landscape around here, and it's perfect for food offerings and for boutique shops. And I think once we get the international tourists back, this area. Even today, it's booming. So just coming out of pandemic, so it's interesting in that respect. So so then you shifted or pivoted your original idea, and then where did that go to?
So once I settled the meat and wine in an international market like Sydney, I always had this yearning and hunger to grow in other countries. So I knew it worked in South Africa, in Cape Town, in Durban and Johannesburg. I thought, okay, I'm going to try it in Dubai. I was offered by a good friend of mine who built one of the casinos in South Africa to take a flight to Dubai and have a look at a new development that Sheikh Mohammed was building on the beach in the Jumeirah, and he wanted a South African steakhouse. So I had a look and I took the plunge. It was a big risk because Dubai 21 years ago wasn't the bar that it is today. And we opened in the Jumeirah Beach, Madinat Jumeirah Resort. And for 6 months I did no business. We opened in the middle of summer, and in Dubai you have a summer and a winter. You only open in winter after Ramadan and summer's over. You never open a restaurant in Ramadan or in summer. It's just too hot. There are no tourists. And all the locals leave Dubai. They all go to London and they go to Paris, and then they come back in winter. And then we saw the business take off. Because all the tourists came, the hotel was full. All the locals heard about this new South African steakhouse. I had all my staff from South Africa join me in Dubai, took them over, and it was a massive success, huge success. I met my publicist Mona. I hired her there in Dubai, and I built a strong team. We ended up opening Abu Dhabi, Bahrain, Kuwait, Israel. In a matter of 5 years, the Middle East exploded for me. Came back, opened in Melbourne, Meat and Wine in South Bank, next to Crown Casino. And then Meat and Wine had momentum and it started getting a name. And then we went to London.
I notice just from speaking to people within your group, it's a very very sound ethics and philosophy behind the group. It's very much a people business. Can you talk about your personal and business philosophy? Because clearly this drives the organisation, and I can see that in people I speak to within your group. So can you tell us what that is and what you set, how you set that agenda from as the CEO of the group?
So any business, all businesses are based on people. I don't believe or listen to people that tell me my cell phone or my jacket or my clothes or my shoes are better than others. It's about the people that are running the organisation, that are working for a common cause and a common goal. And there's a culture that the leaders in the business develop. And our values and culture stems from Middle Eastern family values. Be warm, be courteous, be kind, be polite, have empathy, love what you do, and support one another. And that's been, and never police them for doing their job. I never police any of my staff. No one that works for me. I give them a job description. I give them a direction on where I want them to go, and I let them go. I want them to make mistakes. I want them to learn. I want them to grow other people in their divisions. Because if they grow, I can grow, and if the business grows, we can hire more people. We try and hire the right type of people to join the company, and we have fun at the end of the day.
Now, can we talk a little bit about training? Because currently we're having trouble finding people within the industry. It's really difficult, and a lot of our temporary visa holders have left, so there's a bit of a vacuum. So how do you sort of take all that bank of knowledge that you've had from running the business, and how do you get a new person in, potentially, might be a young local, from here to embrace and engage in that philosophy that you have? What are the things you put in place to do that?
You know what, being in the army, what I picked up from the army was you get recruited. If you want to, you don't want to, but you get recruited. Then they orientate you on what they want you to do and what the army is about. Very similar philosophy in the company. We recruit, we orientate, and then we train them in the position that we want them to go into. Intense training. When I say your army intense training is 3 months, ours is 8 weeks. Intense. And then we give them a person that they work with that will mentor, coach, and develop them in their role. And then we let them run. Once they're ready, they go. And that's what we try and do. Our biggest issue is recruiting at the moment and finding the right people. And with this COVID pandemic that's happened, it's not only us, because our offices in London and Dubai are feeling the same pressures by way of hiring people. And the hospitality industry is resurrecting itself, and as it's doing that, it's sucking people that want to come back into the industry in, but a lot of the people that were in the industry that left don't want to come back in. So there's a big challenge at the moment on how we're going to grow our business and keep growing our business if the challenge is to hire, we cannot hire people. And that's where we are now. So I've got a core team of HR and training and recruitment people having a workshop next week and coming up with ideas on how we're going to do it. The easy way is to go and headhunt, but my policy is never to do that, because if I can do it to somebody, they can do it to me.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because our head of HR's got some great ideas and he wants to present to me next week. So it's going to be exciting.
Excellent. Can we talk a bit about the brands within the Seagrass hospitality group and about the diversity offerings that you do offer to the diner?
Yeah, so I started with meat and wine, understanding how the meat market worked, knowing the meat market, my knowledge in meat and cattle, and we own cattle on a farm now, 400 heads that we circulate on a grass-fed program in Melbourne. Knowing the whole animal, we decided, let's stay in meat, but let's do different tiers. Similar to a BMW 7 Series, 6 Series, 5.3. I kept that philosophy in place. So we have meat and wine. We have 6 head above meat and wine, where we serve premium meats, and you pay for the quality of meat you get. Then we have meat and wine, where we're in this mid-upper market. Then I have a concept called Hunter and Barrel, where it's more orientated to, I'm not saying hunting or fishing or camping, but it's that type of philosophy of eating your product in a restaurant, but that you can get out in the bush or out on the beach. It's that type of menu in Hunter and Barrel. And then we have ribs and burgers, which is solely focused on a very good range of ribs and a very good some chicken, beef and fish burgers. And then we've decided to go into Italian because chicken is the number one eaten protein. Second to that is pasta. And we had an opportunity to go into an Italian concept, a very good Italian chef, so we've decided to do that.
Sounds like a good idea. Now, how many people do you employ in Seagrass Hospitality?
Today, they just sent me the update, HR department, 1,756.
Wow, geez, you've definitely stuck under the radar there. But, I mean, that's amazing positive contribution to the Australian economy, because you're employing local people, giving them opportunity, and we've just come through a really difficult period. So, as the CEO, tell us about your responsibilities and what you feel about having to look after those people, and day to day what your overall responsibilities are for your people and for the group.
So it weighs heavy on my heart, because it's not only the 1,756, it's the people they support. So if you start drilling down into their families, it's way into the thousands. But it's a blessing to bless people who come to work and enjoy what they do. And when you have happy guys or happy people in your business, your staff are happy, the food comes out better, your customers see that your staff are comfortable and happy. We pay a little bit more. I've always wanted to err on the side of paying a little bit more. The responsibility of keeping them in the business long term is how they get treated, how they're valued, and how we appreciate them. And if their input and their output is balanced, they'll stay with me for a long time. If they feel that what they're giving me is not valued, they'll leave. And thank God I've had a very good balance of them giving me and I'm giving them. So I've been blessed.
Yeah, I think that's a very sound philosophy to base the business on too. And engaged people will give you back a far greater output. And so far in the group, the people I've spoken to, you can tell they're engaged and passionate about what you're doing and they want to get involved. And that's good from our point of view, and from the dining public point of view, that's what we want to see when we're eating out. Now, can we talk a little bit about, I don't want to embarrass you, but your involvement with charities, because you're a successful businessman, but you also have time for charities. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, so wherever I've gone around the world, we've linked up to a charity that would help kids or people that were underprivileged. In South Africa, I linked up with the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. We supported the AIDS kids that their parents died from AIDS, and he had a big home, and I supported him through that, and his wife Winnie Mandela through that. When we came here, there was a drug addicted teen, it's called Teen Challenge, where they take homeless people, kids off the street, and they house them, get them off drugs and drink, and then they rehabilitate them. And I gave them an opportunity to hire them and bring them into a job and develop them and make them into the people they should have been. And that was very, very rewarding for me. Because you see someone who was a homeless person who's now working in the kitchen, who never had a car, never slept on a bed, never had a fridge, and now he's married with a kid and he's driving a car. And when I see him every day, or I see them, it gives me great joy. They're my favourite little kids in the business. And in Dubai, we support a kids charity through Sheikh Mohammed's wife. And in London, we support a charity. It's just the way I'm wired in. I don't know why, but it's always been wherever we go around the world, we support a charity. And we've been blessed for doing that.
It's quite a large group. It's interesting, the philosophy, and I guess it extends out to what we just talked about, is very family orientated. That seems to be what I'm feeling, looking from the outside in. Is that their values that you
yeah, well, it is. It's this warm Middle Eastern, if you know Lebanese people who've been to Beirut, everybody invites you into their home, even if they know you or not. It's that warm way of hospitality. And it's also everyone that comes into the group or joins the company, it is a family. Everyone gets kissed, everyone gets hugged if you want. If you're not a hugger or a kisser, you will be at the end of it, because everybody walks around hugging and kissing. So it's one of those warm cultures, and it just, I don't know, it just feeds off one another. It's one of those things that, and then people like that. Our staff like that. They like to be cared for. They like to be loved. They like to be asked about their kids and their family. When I walk in, I ask them, "How's your wife? How's she doing? How's her job?" Wow, you care. But we do, because you work in these hours in our restaurant. Your wife doesn't see you most of the time. I know you well because you work in. How's your wife? And when our staff or leadership team start doing that to our team, it shows that we care. And you want to work for an organisation that cares.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to talk about COVID-19 because everyone's been touched by this in the world. There's no one who this hasn't affected in some way, shape or form, no matter what industry you're in, wherever you are. And I want to talk about, so you've started up your business in Australia, obviously been quite successful,
yeah.
And out of the blue, this lands on the doorstep. Just from a business perspective, putting aside the personal impacts for the moment, what were the first impacts of that to your business?
It was shock. Not knowing how severe it was, not understanding the severity of it, and then getting told everything has to close. You run in 1 week with all your suppliers, with all your staff, and then the next week you've got to close. And I must say that it shocked me because I had offices in London, South Africa, Australia, and Dubai. The first thing I thought about is the people. Second thing I thought about is my suppliers. And how do we plan standing down all our people? How am I going to pay those who are working for us? Because I don't know how long this thing was going to go, so there was confusion. And then looking after the suppliers to say, guys, we're all in the same boat, just relax. Let us understand where we're going with this thing, and then communicating to our landlords. That was my plan, first week. Once we sorted the staff out, and I could say that most of my money that I had went to the staff, because it drained, your tap stopped money coming in, and now you had to pay out. So I said, make sure we look after all our staff. Then we had to look after our visa staff that we had sponsored around the world, because they were all asked to go back. And I called them all to Six Head, and I sat them all down, and I said, there's 300 of them. I said, guys, you need to go back because of family problems, go back. But we want you to stay. Don't worry about your visas. I will form a relief fund for you. And I will pay money into the relief fund to pay you, because you're not going to be eligible, because I'm investing in you. And that moment in my company changed the energy in the company, because everyone was at home. When that message went out that I wasn't sending them home and I was going to form a fund for them, something happened in Seagrass. And since that day, I've had letters, emails, phone calls from their family thanking me for what they did, because London was a disaster, because most of our people that we sponsored came out of London and Europe, was a disaster, and we kept them safe because Australia was a safe haven over the period for COVID. We kept them safe, and then we just navigated through the process until the government, thank goodness, came up with the JobKeeper.
So how important was that at the time it came in?
It was amazing. If it didn't come through, I closed the business.
Wow.
I mortgaged my house. I used all my cash flow in the business, and it came at the perfect. It came 3 weeks before all my money ran out. And if it didn't come, I would have had to close down, and I would have had to get rid of the people I had at the time. So the JobKeeper program and Job Seeker saved me and my business, and then reopening again when we had to. That help of getting the JobKeeper support and understanding that we could still trade and people would still have jobs was a big win for me, and I'm sure for other hospitality groups, but it helped us a hell of a lot.
It's really interesting, because often out of adversity becomes opportunity out of that. And I mean, by the government assisting you to get through that period, now you're going to be doing some expansion, which benefits once again people employed by yourself, and also helps the Australian economy. So can we talk about some of the lessons you learned, and then what the opportunities you've taken out of this experience of COVID?
Yeah, look, you're right. We didn't see them at the time, the opportunities. I sat with my team and I said to them, if we get through this, and JobKeeper holds us through this process, we'll save all those visa jobs, we'll keep all our existing Australian jobs, and I'm going to tell you guys something you're not going to understand or want to hear, but we're going to grow in COVID. And that to my team was a shock, because nobody in the industry was announcing growth. I just signed the Five Guys master franchise for Australia and New Zealand, And I told, because Five Guys pulled the handbrakes and said, no, wait. And I said, no. The opportunities now over the next 2 years that we will never get by way of landlord rentals, by way of siting. We had problems with staff, but the opportunities were better finding the right sites at the right times and getting the right deals. So I pushed the team to do that. And now we have close to 21 stores that we'd signed in that COVID period with very good deals. And they're all going to start opening from August on over the next. So big growth for me has come out of that COVID window. When everyone started closing, JobKeeper dropped away, opportunities came up for us.
Let's talk about, you're going to have both some local opportunities and international opportunities coming out. Can we talk a little bit about local opportunities? Because I believe you're opening a restaurant shortly in Penrith, which is fantastic for that region and area out there. Can you talk a bit about what's going to be happening first locally and then what's on the international horizon?
Okay. So locally, we've I'll get to Penrith. Locally, I did Adelaide, Meat and Wine in COVID. I did Canberra in COVID, a Meat and Wine Canberra, and then the announcement of us growing Five Guys while the COVID pandemic was on was a big shock to everyone. And the CEO of Panthers phoned me and said, "Listen, if you are growing, I have a site for you. Please come and have a look at it." And amazing team at Panthers. We did a great deal with them. Great deal. I don't believe I could have done a better deal. Nicer people. And we're all excited to open the first one. The second one we've signed is in George Street next to the Apple building.
Excellent.
So, and then we're looking at local growth for Five Guys into Melbourne and into Perth and then into Brisbane. So over the next 3 years, we've got a nice growth plan for Five Guys. Internationally, it's exciting because I did the same instruction to Dubai and to London office. Don't sit in your caves. Don't worry about COVID. It's going to end. Let's look for sites and opportunities. I partnered up with a very, very talented young Middle Eastern chef, Roy, which I know you know, exceptional. Him and I did a partnership on a Middle Eastern concept, and we're opening our first one in London in Mayfair.
Very exciting.
So the opportunity we got there in COVID was brilliant. We open in Dubai this hunter and barrel concept. We've opened one already. We've got another 2 signed up, one for Abu Dhabi and one for middle of Dubai in the Murdoch Centre. And then we're looking at a Meat and Wine in London in 2023. So there's been, through COVID, there's been that expansion and the opportunity even to grow more with the offers that we're getting in the Middle East and London are being phenomenal.
Excellent.
So there's great opportunity.
Well, can I thank you for your time, Bradley? You're obviously CEO of a big group, so thank you for taking the time out today. Also, it's an inspiring story for other businesses because if one business succeeds, it gives other people hope. So that's also an encouraging story, and also for your staff. I mean, that they're very lucky to have someone who's had that duty of care and taken them through this pandemic period. So well done on that from just a human factors point of view. That's fantastic. I mean, and I look forward to actually speaking with you again, maybe a little bit down the further when we move on.
Nice.
But no, thank you for being with us today, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Bradley.
Pleasure.
Cheers.
Thanks so much.